as I said before, this is a myth-busting section. With nutrition information, there's always a lot of myths floating around. So I've come up with a few. We're going to go through them with Dan, and he's going to tell us if they're a myth or there's some truth to them. Or maybe there's somewhere in between. We don't know.
Let's get to it.
So number one, which I think we've kind of covered, you can't get enough protein on a plant-based diet.
Great myth. Absolutely myth. Not fact. False. I think we've discussed it in length today about it's just about being protein smart. I think we could coin the term and making sure that we have a surplus of different protein options that are plant-based to our disposal, because it's not as readily available as what, general protein is, typically speaking.
You will lose muscle on a plant-based diet.
Oh, great myth as well. So in terms of busting that, again, what we have to remember is where that comes from, which is can't get protein in, and we're eating more veg-based options as opposed to eating more carbohydrates, maybe because we think that we need more plants in a plant-based diet. If our protein requirements, as we've discussed earlier, our gram per kilogram requirements are being met in a capacity of plant-based protein, no problem with kind of degrading muscle mass. And if we maintain our carb intake, which most carb sources haven't got any kind of meat or non-plant-based foods in, so we shouldn't struggle with switching out our carb sources, then absolutely we'll maintain our mass. We won't lose weight. The only way to lose weight is obviously being in a calorie deficit, and that tends to happen easier for a plant-based eater because they'll tend to shift more towards fruit and veg as an option for food, knowing that it's completely plant-based. Whereas if we're just smart with our carb intake and our protein intake, we won't lose weight. And if we wanted to lose weight, then it might seem easier because there's more options that help us lose weight. But if we don't want to, we don't have to lose weight.
Okay, great. Plant-based diets enhance athletic performance.
Again, I feel like we're just going to go myth here. Is a myth. I will throw curveball in and say there is some element of truth. I think the one thing plant-based diets do that don't get enough credit is it sets a rule for an athlete. Similarly with fasting, it's one of those things where we know that fasting doesn't equal weight loss. It's the calorie restriction during the fast that equals weight loss. And if we set a rule that we're only eating in a 4-hour window, the rest of the time we don't consume all the junk that we usually would. So similarly with plant-based eating, it doesn't enhance athletic performance. If we took two athletes, one that ate really well as a normal meat-eating diet and one that was a plant-based and ate really well, they'd perform and athletically be equivocal to each other. The challenge comes that the person that's eating plant-based has a few more rules in place. They can't go and grab a bag of Cadbury's chocolate at 10 o'clock at night and just eat them, or a bag of Haribo's because there's gelatin in them. Whereas somebody who's non-plant-based might be able to go and sneak in the cupboard and grab more stuff. So the options are normally healthier, which then results better athletic performance. But somebody who's non-plant-based can still be as athletic as somebody who's plant-based. It's just about ensuring that they stay clear of some of those cues to go and eat loads of chocolate, sweets and crisps.
Love it. One you've just answered. Plant-based diets help you lose weight. Quick question. How do people lose weight? Is it the diet or is it the calorie deficit?
It's absolutely the latter, the calorie deficit. If we're thinking about energy balance, and this is where athletes have to be careful as well, because losing too much weight or rapid weight loss over a short space of time is going to be negative towards performance. Likewise, the opposite side, putting on too much weight too quickly is going to be negative to performance. So it's managing it in a way that's going to be, I suppose, safe and beneficial to an athlete. So plant-based foods don't specifically help you lose weight. It's the way in which we eat. And similarly, if we put any rule in place, so fasting, plant-based diets, whatever that rule might be, seems to make it easier to lose weight because we've got a set of rules in place. But if we took normal eating and set some rules around a calorie deficit, i.e. eating less food than what we're expending, we're going to find a general trend of weight loss. Now, for different athletes, and I get this question quite a lot from parents, is I want my son, who's a rugby player, I want him to lose a bit of weight and maintain his muscle. What calories does he need per day? It's so individualized on activity, on especially young athletes, on maturation and growth. and also looking at their day-to-day habits and activities. So like, yes, we can factor in training, but they might be at a college where they're doing a lot of sport and physical work. They might be in an office where they're sat doing not a lot. So it's so individual that in a podcast, it'd be very difficult to say, this is how you lose weight. But ultimately, the myth comes from the fact that the rules that are set around plant-based eating makes it slightly easier for our brain to comprehend how to lose weight. Whereas if we've got no rules, we can break that quite easy and become a bit of a binger on certain foods if we're over-restricting.
Yeah, love it. A plant-based diet helps you detox your body. Sorry, I can't help myself.
So I think the smile and the laugh is probably giving away that that's a big myth. Detox is such a word, and I think it sits very much in the health space, and every now and again creeps over to the sports performance side. I hear a few athletes saying, I'm on a detox, or they've bought some certain herbal teas to detox, or whatever it might be. Now, for me, we should never need to detox the body. It's something that if we're consuming the right types of foods in the right proportions, then there's no real need to detox. I think sometimes that is true to some people in terms of they want to reset, and maybe they're in a really bad place of eating where they're consistently in a cycle of binging. So it might be that they spend all week trying to be really healthy, and at the weekend they go out and binge on all kinds of foods because they've over suppressed during the week. Now, instead of adopting a plant-based diet, because as we said earlier, we shouldn't be doing that for the wrong reasons, we should be doing it for the right reasons. For me, adopt something like an 80-20 rule. If we need a rule to put in place, the 80-20 rule kind of kills all. It's 80% of the time, all the good foods that, nutritionists will talk about, and then 20% of the time, allow yourself that time for the fun foods. And I call them the fun foods, not the unhealthy foods, because unless it creeps over 20%, that's when they become unhealthy. And even if you look at the Eat Well plate that is obviously well known, taught in schools, government guidance of how to eat, you'll see that big wheel in the middle of all of the split sections is your 80%. And you'll notice, depending on which way you're looking around it, at the bottom left-hand corner, there is actually pictures of like Coca-Cola, chocolate, crisps, and it'll say eat less often and in smaller amounts. That's your 20% over in that corner. So even if we're watching this and we're not an athlete, I think it's so important that we know how to manage the kind of food intake to support the detox in a way. And if we just opt for an 80-20 approach, as opposed to trying an extreme diet, we're not going to fail because it's quite an easier approach than switching up our whole cupboards of foods that we've got. But also it'll help us feel healthier as opposed to trying to detox and then being unhealthy again for ages and then detoxing again.
Yeah. No. Well, that is all the myth busting sections. You heard it here first. I think every one of them was a myth.
Yeah, I don't think we had a truth in that, which is probably a good depiction of the nutrition industry at the minute with how many myths there are out there at the minute.
100%, but it's always good to get, your expertise on this to kind of educate people, because as we said, there's a lot of misinformation out there. I'm trying to put some real truth out there, and I think that was just that. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed that clip, click here to get the full episode, and don't forget to subscribe.